conduct, interfering with police, and other state and city offenses. If you remain in the roadway and show the intent to engage in physical resistance to removal, or if emergency circumstances require, you may be subject to uses of force, including riot control agents and impact weapons. Move to the sidewalk and disperse now.
Hey, everybody, we're gonna move all the way to the wall.
So there was a bit of a convergence right in front of this Starbucks.
Are you vlogging or something?
For the Oregon Live.
What's that?
Online. So we're back online. This is McKenna Ross for the Oregonian and Oregon Live. There's a bit of convergence over here at the Starbucks, and the police brought up a police line. We're split again. So we're on Morrison and Broadway. We're letting a train through now. Started throwing a bit of firecrackers. The bike cops pushed through to get the line set up. There was a big convergence between counter-protesters. Once again, this protest, we started at Pioneer Square. Some right-wing protesters.
Morrison is open to vehicular traffic. This is not permitted march. You are not allowed to block or impede traffic. You must immediately vacate the roadway and proceed to the sidewalk. Throwing substances and objects at people constitutes harassment. If you participate in this behavior, you are subject to arrest. If you remain in the roadway and show the intent to engage in physical resistance to removal, or if emergency circumstances require, you may be subject to uses of force, including riot control agents and impact weapons. Move to the sidewalk and disperse now.
So the original protest at Pioneer Square, that was some right-wing protesters. They were talking about, fighting against domestic terrorism and on the Him Too movement. Then we had some counter-protesters set up on Chapman Square and Lonsdale Square. One of them was throwing a dance party.
Morrison is open to vehicular traffic. This is an unpermitted march. You are not allowed to block or impede traffic. You must immediately vacate the roadway and proceed to the sidewalk. Throwing substances and objects at people constitutes harassment. If you participate in this behavior, you are subject to arrest. If you remain in the roadway and show the intent to engage in physical resistance to removal, or if emergency circumstances require, you may be subject to uses of force, including riot control agents and impact weapons. Move to the sidewalk and disperse now.
So then counter-protesters.
Police Bureau. Southwest Broadway and Southwest Morrison is open to vehicular traffic. This is an unpermitted march. You are not allowed to block or impede traffic. You must immediately vacate the roadway and proceed to the sidewalk. Throwing substances and objects at people constitutes harassment. If you participate in this behavior, you are subject to arrest. If you remain in the roadway and show the intent to engage in physical resistance to removal, or if emergency circumstances require, you may be subject to uses of force, including riot control agents and impact weapons. Move to the sidewalk and disperse now.
This is fucking wild.
You check out OregonLive.com. We've got a live update going on right there. That will show all of the reasonings, the groups coming from where they came from.
This is an unpermitted march.
But right now we've got
vacate the roadway and proceed to the sidewalk. Throwing substances and objects at people constitutes harassment. If you participate in this behavior, you are subject to arrest. If you remain in the roadway and show the intent to engage in physical resistance to removal, or if emergency circumstances require, you may be subject to uses of force, including riot control agents and impact weapons. Move to the sidewalk and disperse now.
Look at the police blocking off the roads because there's an unpermitted march. That's what they're saying. Unpermitted march coming through, and they, cut off the two groups to make sure that they weren't going head to head. And now we're trying to let traffic go through.
When does the march get here?
This is the same activity that's been going on since about noon today. Got a few different protests and counter-protests around the city. And they're kind of converging around Pioneer Square. The police are trying to, cut them off, make sure that they don't hit each other, clash with each other. So far, No deployment of any crowd controls in this area. But check other areas. Check online, OregonLive.com, for any kinds of updates regarding what might be happening today. We got an espresso bar. So this crowd, it's hard to estimate. We've got a lot of onlookers wondering what's going on. We had original Pioneer Square protesters, and the crowd was about, 30 or so people. We have counter protesters coming up. Other journalists telling me, estimating crowd size at around 200. All right, we've got All right, police on the move. The original protest in Pioneer Square, that was run, that was kind of started by Haley Adams. She was leading a group, and they were running the Him Too movement. They were talking about the injustices that they feel and things along those lines. We've got, like I said, two other areas in the city that had activity going on, and they all kind of marched this way to meet up. So the police are, kind of trying to force out the convergence.
Oh, they basically just add a little.
And if you check out OregonLive.com, you'll be able to see all of the background that we have, showing the reasoning of these said protests, what happened last year. So you just heard police saying that this is an unlawful assembly on Pioneer Square. They're saying riot control agents will be used.
Those near Pioneer Courthouse Square, this is now an unlawful assembly. All persons on Pioneer Courthouse Square property must disperse by traveling away from the area. You are ordered to disperse immediately. Failure to adhere to this order may subject you to arrest or citation and may subject you to the use of riot control agents or impact weapons. You have failed to adhere to a police order. You must disperse now. Riot control agents will be used in this area.
Those of you tuning in, some counter protesters clashing and police, and now in Pioneer Square, now police are determining it to be an unlawful assembly, breaking up the protest. People are dispersing.
No fascists in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! No fascists in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! No fascists in our town!
So you're gonna watch out for graphic language.
No fascists in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! No fascists in our town! Portland
Yeah, watch out for graphic language.
No fascists in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! No fascists in our town! town. Portland fucking holds it down. No fascists in our town. Portland fucking holds it down.
So we're on the move.
No fascists in our town.
Just crossing Park Hill. Park and Yam Hill.
No fascists in our town.
Getting caught up in the anti-protesters.
No fascists in our town.
Portland fucking holds it down.
No fascists in our town.
Portland fucking holds it down.
No fascists in our town. Fucking hold it down. No fascists in our town.
We're outside of Pendleton now. Looks like a clothing store. They've actually got a sign up that says, "Due to unforeseen protests, our security chose to keep the building closed until further notice. We will open up later today given building security." So that's kind of the scene around here. They're a block away.
I'm sorry, I didn't know this was happening. Thank you.
So that just kind of gives you an insight on what the reaction to this protest is kind of happening with the businesses around town. There, at least this one is closing for security reasons. Now there haven't been any violence, or they haven't released any control agents that, in my corner at least, but they are preparing. Last year there was a protest clash between protesters and anti-protesters on both sides, right and left wing, and that actually turned into a riot. The police declared it a riot because of all of the activity. So hence the police presence today, making sure that doesn't happen again. Okay. Now police are establishing a line at 10th Avenue. 10th and Yam Hill. All right, again, watch out for graphic language. I've got a line. Looks like they're building the line in part to let the Max coming in red line trying to come through, but they are clearing the road to ensure that the Max line can come through. Or at least that's what it appears to be. Yeah, just some context for where we are. It's at 10th and Yam Hill, so we're right next to Central Library. For any of you tuning in just now, we've got some protesters and counter-protesters converging in different spots, mostly centered around, it started around Pioneer Square, but the police declared it an unlawful assembly. People were scattering. Now we're on the move. If you check out OregonLive.com, that will give you all the context of who these groups are, who they say they are, why they came out today, what they did last year and the year before that. OregonLive.com has all of the information. Coming through. Perfect time to give you all a recap of what's been going on so far. So my name is McKenna Ross, reporter with the Oregon Live, Oregonian Oregon Live, and we started out at Pioneer Square. We had a group of right-wing protesters. They were there primarily talking about, they said they started with the Him Too movement. It was led by Haley Adams. She started the Him Too movement, and she was out here today. She's probably still out here. Haven't seen her recently, though. And as some other counter-protests around the city, around the downtown area, heard of this, they all kind of marched forward toward Pioneer Square. So police had, built a line trying to stop them from the two sides from converging in Pioneer Square. And that was, that line stood up on 6th and Morrison for, maybe 30 or so minutes. And the line kind of dispersed after some people moved off. But we came back online to show you there was another kind of disturbance, people getting in each other's faces. Police came through, they built the line back up again. And as issues kept going on, as people kept arguing, converging, police declared everything happening at Pioneer Square an unlawful assembly. That's why we moved on. We were following some counter-protesters. Now we're at the library stop of the Red Line on Max. If you check out OregonLive.com, I don't know how many times I can stress this enough, but if you check out OregonLive.com, we've got all of the background of what's going on today, if it's happened, how it's happened before.
I think there's more people in that way, so I didn't record it into that way.
Check out OregonLive.com. They've got all the context of what's going on, what's happened before, if it's happening, what's going on today.
With the police, because that'll get us what we want.
All right. So we're heading east, back on Yamhill, toward Park Avenue. Oops. Park Avenue. And back down toward Pioneer Square. This is that store that I pointed out earlier that has a sign that says that it's
Just help them escape.
closed due to the unforeseen protest. Their, security reasons they're keeping it closed. Kind of a good context of, the reaction to the area. It looks like the Nordstrom, again, Park Avenue and Yamhill, they've got people in the doorway, so they might be keeping closed as well. Protesters and counter-protesters from the right and left wing have clashed in Portland before, as many of you have pointed out in comments. Clashed in Portland before. In the past, there's been a little bit of violence enough to have the police declare the march a riot. They revoked the permits last year. But so far this year, our view has not seen anything violent. But if you check OregonLive.com, guess what I'm saying again? If you check OregonLive.com, that'll have some context, and that'll have all of the live updates, any information that we might get from police. We will be able to feed it online, feed it into our Facebook comments, check our Twitter, @Oregonian. We're crossing Broadway right now. Back at Pioneer Square. This crowd that we're coming up on is a lot larger than where we were over in that corner on 10th. My viewpoint up here in the southwest corner of Pioneer Square, we've got a police line up there on, again, 6th and Morrison, blocking protesters, counter-protesters coming through. So we'll go down there and see what we can see. We've got... Excuse me while I walk down the steps. So now we're at 6th and Morrison, a lot closer. You can see the police line preventing people from all sides. There's a sign I saw earlier. They're coming through and marching without a permit. Transit lines. So if you are trying to come downtown, I would avoid using the red line. That one's been stopped a lot. And the green line as well has been having some issues. But particularly the red line, as it's on the north and south side of Pioneer Square. It's been stopped a lot. I'm going to advise you to seek an alternative route. Got some singing.
Hey guys, you're stopping the train behind you. No, really, no one's blocking the road. Thank you. That wasn't funny. Every time I see those cars, all they keep doing is oh no, that's they usually get out of the way.
So for anyone just tuning in, we're here with the Oregonian Live, or Oregon Live. About 1 o'clock today was the start of a right-wing protest led by an activist, Haley Adams, online kind of billed as a him too movement against the quote-unquote use of counterterrorism. They were protesting for that. They had about 30 people in the center of Pioneer Square. And mostly kind of talking to himself. Every once in a while, they would kind of get engaged with someone against their views, and they would kind of get in each other's faces. Now we've got people chanting at the police because the police line is not letting the Max come through. That's what they're saying now. Move for the Max.
You can still park in the road.
I think this is our vegan milkshake stand. They were advertising vegan milkshakes, part of their counter-protest dance party that happened around noon, but they were starting, I think it was in Chapman Square, and clearly they have moved over here. Part of the, probably part of the groups that came forward, they were kind of counter-protesting that original right-wing group that I had mentioned earlier. So they came up this street, actually, right at this corner, and they got stopped by a police line saying it was an unpermitted march. You can't, there's supposed to be traffic coming through. There was not much traffic coming through because of the police lines and because of the counter-protesters. Like standoff, or not so quite standoff, but that standstill lasted, I would say, about 30 minutes. And then it kind of dispersed. We moved away, and counter-protesters and protesters kind of got in each other's face over on Broadway and Morrison. Police created another line, pushing people through, and then they actually said that the gathering in Pioneer Square was a unpermitted protest or unpermitted gathering, forgetting the words, and they would be releasing crowd control agents if people didn't move, and so a lot of people dispersed.
Anybody need any snacks?
But now we're back here. So I'd say all of this action has been going on for 3.5 hours. Ooh, did anyone see that scooter trip? Cool. All this action has been going on for about 3.5 hours from different corners of downtown Portland. But it's kind of converged here in Pioneer Square, in and out of moments, kind of tense moments catching. And if you are lost about what's going on, I would say go to OregonLive.com or check us out on Twitter at The Oregonian. We have all of the context coming into today, as well as what's been going on for the past 3 hours. Here's what's going on the street. Not as much of a police line right now, but we've got a medical ambulance coming through, as well as the train still stopped, the Max, on about a block over, on 5th.
Turn! That was after I got told that everybody wanted that.
I'm gonna.
You were also dumb how to get over here. I'm calling you out.
City worker. This is Portland.
We got a lot of onlookers.
Hey, they're coming!
Okay, here comes the police.
Cattle them! Cattle them!
You look geared up for violence.
We got some police coming up, trying to split up this tension going on here. Looks like they'll probably be making a line. Here we've got some tension going on now. Once again, we are at Pioneer Square following some counter-protesters and protesters converging. Part of the group was one protesting counter-protester was Rose City Antifa, and one group, at least, was part of Proud Boys or Patriot Prayer. They have since
Move for the max.
kind of dispersed, so it's hard to say who's what group.
Move for the max. 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 Move for the max.
They're chanting because the max has been stopped. Red line coming west. Has been stopped for a little bit now, so every once in a while they've been kind of chanting that to the police who've created a line on Sick and Morrison. And if you're just tuning in, check out OregonLive.com for all the live updates that we've created.
I'm not even after. I'm out for revenge against Aryan Brotherhood, you fucking idiots.
And watch for some language.
Hey, don't speed through downtown, assholes! I don't care if you're a fucking cop!
The law is the law.
Trying to fuck the law, fuckers!
And this, we're only on this side. We just kind of got trapped on this side. We've been moving around. Mostly staying in Pioneer Square, different corners of Pioneer Square.
Great. This is nice and public next to a bus.
You know I have all saving grace.
You do, but I don't
Please, pull out your camera! Take a look!
If I had a beard, I could look old. And
Why
get
did
more
they gear
respect.
up? Why did they pull their gear on all of a sudden? Who's agitating here?
Get the fuck out!
Hold your cards. This is not everyone's What did you do? Hey! Take your bird!
Hey!
So this kind of convergence of protesters and counter-protesters, it's been going on for 2.5 hours approximately, with a lot of the action starting to happen around 2 o'clock, so 1.5 hours ago, when counter-protesters came up 6th Avenue. Since then, it's kind of been dispersed off and on by, kind of forced apart by the police. But now we've got a little bit of chanting going on the other side. Again, watch out for graphic language. And if you check out OregonLive.com, they have all the background of the groups that said they were coming out today and the reasonings they were coming out a year ago. Initial protesting came from, we had a gathering at about 1 o'clock from a couple different groups, Patriot Prayer, one at Waterfront Park, Proud Boys allegedly, and they all kind of came around Pioneer Square. Now we've got some counter-protesters. Some have said they are with Rose City Antifa. Some are just kind of here, chanting.
We don't want your definition of greatness.
Who do you serve?
That is basically the gist of this protest, is kind of a convergence of counter-protests fighting, arguing different points against each other. Every once in a while it gets pretty tense and the police have to cut in, and they've created lines like 2 or 3 times, at least in this area. Just in this area alone.
Who's paying me to protest today? Are you paying me to protest today?
I know.
I want my paycheck. I want my paycheck.
Don't worry. Oh, George Soros.
I don't pay my parking.
Yeah, I think that's what you see.
I know. Hi, my name is George Soros. I'll tell you what, you want to have a drink, baby? I'll talk about it. Hey, it's almost 4:20. We say we go get ripped. I know, man. Fuck it. You're my, oh, yeah.
A little warm to go to South Florida.
I feel like protesting is a choice.
Pissed off. I don't give a damn. I'm mad as hell. No, that's not me.
Let the max through.
I'm totally pissed off.
People want to go home.
And it wasn't regular
On this side, I would say we've got quite a few people, maybe even more than 100 people.
Give that man the ticket, damn it! This revolution, if he gets on the local level, take out the people can't walk, shoot them! This is how revolution begins, right here, take them out! What's that all about? Get the fuck out of Dodge! Thanks. I'm already out.
I think we just, I don't know if you just saw that, but a man just threw a milkshake at another man. try to get out of the line of fire. But that was what just happened. You see that? Person over here.
No Nazis in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! No Nazis in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! No Nazis in our town! Portland fucking holds it down! 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 Portland fucking holds it down!
I guess these people.
Portland fucking holds it down! Portland fucking holds it down!
All right, guys. Once again, my name is McKenna Ross. I am a reporter with the Oregonian and OregonLive.com. We're at Pioneer Square monitoring counter-protesters and protesters converging. If you go to OregonLive.com, you can check out for all the updates, but my phone's at 6%. So I think this live stream has kind of reached its life, at least from my perspective. So stay tuned online. Maybe we'll have another reporter throw up a live stream. Check out OregonLive.com, and they've got all the questions of what's going on, who is protesting, why they protested, what happened last year, all of that good context. OregonLive.com. Thanks for watching.